The jarring ring of my cell phone shattered the quiet calm of our living room. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a knot form in my stomach. Ely, my brother-in-law. Hello, I answered cautiously. Marla, don't play dumb with me, Eli's gruff voice barked through the speaker. When are you going to pay me back the 60 grand you borrowed? My eyes widened in disbelief. What are you talking about? I never borrowed any money from you. Don't insult me with your lies, he shouted. Nathan came to me 2 years ago begging for a loan because you two were drowning in debt. He promised he'd pay it all back once he got that big real estate deal. My heart pounded as confusion swirled in my mind. A $60,000 loan? Real estate deal? Why was this the first I was hearing about it? Ellie, I don't know what you're talking about, but Nathan and I are certainly not drowning in debt. There must be some misunderstanding. A bitter laugh crackled through the phone. Misunderstanding? You ungrateful. Don't you dare talk to my wife like that. Nathan's voice startled me as he snatched the phone from my hands. I watched his face contort in anger as he paced back and forth, growling harsh whispers I couldn't make out. The veins bulged from his neck as he argued fiercely with his brother. My mind raced to make sense of Eli's wild accusations. Had Nathan really taken out a massive loan without telling me? And what debt was he talking about? As far as I knew, we were doing fine financially, a little tight with the housing market dip, but nothing unmanageable. Right? Doubt crept in as I replayed the past few months. Nathan's suspiciously long work hours, the hushed phone conversations whenever I entered a room, our dwindling savings that he always blamed on expenses. I shuddered, feeling like I didn't recognize the man I loved anymore. Nathan abruptly ended the call, his face flushed red. He ran his fingers through his hair, letting out a frustrated exhale. What's going on, Nathan? I asked, unable to hide the slight tremble in my voice. Did you really take out a loan from Eli? He avoided eye contact, his jaw tightening. It's complicated, but you don't need to worry about it. The hell I don't, I snapped, surprising both of us with my outburst. Eli made it sound like we're drowning in debt, and you've been lying to me about money troubles. Nathan finally met my gaze, his eyes a swirling storm of conflict. Marla, you've got to trust me on this, okay? I'll handle it. I opened my mouth to protest, but he gently placed his finger on my lips, forcing a weak smile. Everything will be fine, I promise. He leaned in and kissed my forehead before grabbing his jacket and keys. Where are you going? Out. He muttered without explanation, heading for the front door. I watched helplessly as he left our home, slamming the door behind him. Doubts and suspicions swirled violently in the pit of my stomach. Who was this person I'd married, and why did I feel like I was surrounded by lies? I spent a restless night, staring at the ceiling, replaying Eli's biting words in my head. A $60,000 loan? How could Nathan have racked up that kind of debt without my knowledge? As the sun peeked through the curtains, I heard the front door creak open. Feigning sleep, I listened to Nathan's heavy footsteps and the muffled thud of his jacket hitting the floor. I rolled over, my eyes catching sight of the weary slump in his shoulders as he entered the bedroom. You're home late, I said flatly. Nathan flinched, clearly not expecting me to be awake. Yeah, had to work overtime on this new property listing. Lies. That's all I'd been hearing from him lately. My jaw clenched as I studied the dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. We need to talk about what Eli said. Marla, it's nothing, he grumbled, avoiding eye contact as he loosened his tie. My idiot brother has never been able to mind his own business. Then explain it to me, I shot back, anger bubbling up. Explain these mysterious debts and a $60,000 loan you apparently took from him behind my back. Nathan whirled around, his eyes flashing with rage. Because it's between me and him, all right? You weren't involved. We're married, Nathan, I shouted, jumping out of bed. When did you decide anything involving that kind of money wouldn't involve me? His face softened slightly as he opened his mouth to respond. But I wasn't finished. And that's not even the worst part, I seethed. The absolute worst is you lying to me this whole damn time. Nathan winced as my words struck a nerve. I haven't been lying. Oh, yeah? I stalked over to the dresser and yanked open the drawer, rifling through it until I found the bank statements. Then how about explaining these? I shoved the documents into his chest. pointing at the dwindling numbers that told a very different story than his "everything is fine" platitudes. "Our savings account is getting drained every month, and you keep telling me it's for bills or expenses for work." My voice cracked with a mix of anger and hurt. "What expenses, Nathan?" The truth, for once. He stared down at the statements, his jaw clenched tightly. The strangled silence between us was deafening. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse mutter. "I got in too deep. There's a big deal I've been working, but it required way more upfront cash than I had." He dragged a hand down his face warily. "I took the loan from Eli to cover it, telling him I'd pay him back once I landed this property." "And you couldn't tell me any of this because—" I folded my arms, raising my eyebrows expectantly. Nathan sighed heavily, plopping down on the edge of the bed. "You've been so focused on your career and wanting to start a family soon, I didn't want to disappoint you or add even more stress." My body went rigid as his words washed over me. More lies. Flimsy justifications for keeping me in the dark. Disappointment burned through me like acid. How had the devoted man I fell in love with become such a stranger? I fixed Nathan with a cold stare. "Get out!" His head snapped up, eyes widening in shock. "Marla, wait, please." "Get out of my house," I repeated slowly, my voice dripping with venom. "I can't even look at you right now." For a beat, Nathan looked like he might protest. But something in my expression must have convinced him otherwise. With slumped shoulders, he silently retrieved his jacket and walked out the door, leaving me alone with my swirling storm of rage and anguish. The deafening silence that filled our home after Nathan left was suffocating. Part of me wanted to believe his lies, to cling to the man I thought I knew. But the gut-wrenching truth hung heavy in the air. My husband had betrayed my trust in the worst way. I slouched on the couch, my head in my hands as I fought back tears. I couldn't keep living oblivious and naive while he squandered our future. It was time to take action. Grabbing my laptop, I logged into our bank accounts, my heart sinking with each new statement I pulled up. The numbers didn't lie. Huge sums were being siphoned out every month into some unknown void. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text notification from Eli. "We need to talk, face to face. I'll swing by this afternoon." I didn't bother responding, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. I spent the next few hours gathering any other evidence of Nathan's deception. Credit card statements, suspicious numbers frequently called from his phone, reports of unusual cash withdrawals from various ATMs. By the time Eli arrived, I was sitting amidst a storm of incriminating paperwork, my mind swirling with anger and disbelief. Eli barged in without knocking, his face set in stern determination. "Marla, He froze, taking in the documents scattered around me. "What is all this?" "Proof," I stated flatly, gesturing for him to sit down on the couch. "Proof that my husband has been lying to me about everything. Money has been disappearing from our accounts for months, maybe even years." As I launched into a detailed recounting of Nathan's excuses and evasions, Eli's expression morphed into seething rage. "That lying sack of shit," he growled, slamming his fist on the coffee table. "So he really took that loan from me under false pretenses?" What was his excuse? Why did he need $60,000 from you?" I demanded. Eli let out a bitter chuckle as he shook his head. "Get this. The moron claimed there was some urgent need for cash to keep your family's real estate business afloat. Spun this whole tale of hitting hard times and needing a bailout." My jaw dropped in disbelief. Our tiny, perpetually struggling real estate startup could barely afford the office rent, let alone require that kind of massive infusion of cash. "You're kidding me," I whispered, anger burning in my chest. I stood abruptly, snatching my keys off the counter. "That's it. I've had enough lying and deception." "Where are you going?" Eli asked as I stormed toward the door. "To get the truth, once and for all," I tossed over my shoulder. "And you're coming with me." Within minutes, we were speeding down the road, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. We didn't exchange any words. Eli could see the tumult of emotion roiling across my face. Finally, we arrived at a dingy pool hall on the edge of town. I'd heard rumors of high-stakes poker games taking place in the back rooms, but never imagined Nathan being involved. I shoved open the doors and marched inside, scanning the dimly lit room with narrowed eyes until I spotted a familiar frame hunched over the billiards table. "Nathan." "You lying piece of shit!" I screamed, causing every head to snap in our direction. Nathan whirled around, his eyes widening in shock and fear. In that moment, I saw the man he truly was, not the partner I devoted my life to, but a selfish coward willing to gamble away everything we'd built. I stormed toward him, Eli hot on my heels as the other patrons shrank back. "You've got some explaining to do, asshole," Eli growled, cracking his knuckles menacingly. "And you better not leave out a single goddamn detail." Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply stared back at us, pale and trembling as the walls closed in. The look of sheer terror on Nathan's face should have given me some perverse satisfaction. But as I stood there, fists clenched and chest heaving, all I felt was a hollow ache of betrayal. "Well?" Eli barked, taking a threatening step forward. "You gonna explain yourself, little brother, or am I gonna have to beat it out of you?" Nathan's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. His gaze flickered around the hushed pool hall, seeming to realize there was no escape from this reckoning. I messed up, okay?" he stammered, holding up his hands defensively. "I got caught up in some bad business deals that put me in the hole financially." My eyes narrowed to slits. "So you lied and took $60,000 from your own brother to cover your ass, and then kept lying to me about all of it?" Something flashed in Nathan's eyes. Was it shame? Remorse? I couldn't tell, and quite frankly, I didn't care anymore. "The loan was just supposed to be temporary," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I was going to pay Eli back once this big property deal went through, but things spun out of control." "Out of control?" I scoffed derisively, shaking my head in disgust. "Our bank accounts were getting drained every month from gambling debts and whatever illegal crap you were pulling in these sleazy underground games." Nathan opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a raised hand. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the thick stack of documents I'd gathered, statements, histories, and photocopies cataloging Nathan's astounding web of deception. "This," I shoved the papers against his chest, my voice trembling with rage, "is everything I've uncovered about your disgusting betrayal, every filthy secret, every repulsive lie you told me." With a sinking feeling, Nathan thumbed through the evidence, his face paling as the magnitude of his misdeeds was laid bare. "Marla, I can explain." "Save it," I spat. "I'm done listening to your pathetic excuses." From the corner of my eye, I noticed the other pool hall patrons shifting uncomfortably, wanting no part of this messy confrontation. Good. I wanted them to see the lying, cheating scumbag I'd been married to. Eli stepped up beside me, cracking his knuckles ominously. "So what's it gonna be, Nathan? You gonna come clean about how big of a dirtbag you've been?" Panic flickered across Nathan's face as he looked between us helplessly. "Please, just give me one more chance. I can fix this, I swear!" Something inside me snapped at his sniveling pleas. Winding my arm back, I let loose a slap that cracked across his cheek with a resounding smack. "You already had your chance, you selfish prick!" I shouted, poking him hard in the chest. "Now it's time to pay up for every dollar and every lie." Hot tears stung my eyes as I glared at the man I once loved, the person I naively hitched my entire future to. Eli was right. He was a lying sack of shit, not even worthy of being called family. Nathan cradled his reddened cheek, his eyes filled with a childlike fear. The air was thick with tension as we reached an impasse, the ultimatum hanging perilously. "Well," Eli growled, flexing his thick arms menacingly, "you gonna start talking and make things right? Or do we got a problem here?" My heart pounded against my ribs as Nathan's gaze met mine, silently pleading for some shred of mercy or understanding. But there was nothing left to salvage. He was on his own now. Over the next few days, I operated in an enraged haze, making preparation after preparation for the inevitable confrontation. I invited a few of our closest mutual friends over under the pretense of a peacemaking dinner between Nathan and Eli. Little did Nathan know it was the setup for his grand unveiling as a liar and a cheat. When he arrived that evening, looking sheepish and apprehensive, I greeted him with hollow politeness. The others chatted and made small talk over drinks in the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. As dinner commenced, the atmosphere thickened with tension. I noticed beads of sweat forming on Nathan's brow as he kept shooting nervous glances between Eli and me. "So," our friend Mark spoke up after an uncomfortable lull, What's really going on here? We all know you two have beef. I exchanged a loaded look with Eli, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Showtime. Clearing my throat, I fixed Nathan with an icy glare. You want to know what's going on? How about we start with Nathan taking out a secret $60,000 loan from Eli? The table fell into stunned silence, all eyes swiveling to Nathan in shock. His face drained of color as he gripped his fork tightly. She's lying, he croaked out, shaking his head vehemently. I never took any loan. In one deft motion, Eli reached into his jacket and slammed a thick manila envelope onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, scattering utensils. Really, bro? His tone dripped with disdain. Because I've got bank statements, text messages, and a whole damn paper trail showing otherwise. With trembling hands, Eli extracted the stack of documents, letting them flutter out as undeniable proof. My chest tightened as I watched the realization wash over our friends' faces. The confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror at the depths of Nathan's betrayal. No. Angela, my closest friend, whispered as she stared at the paperwork. How could you, Nathan? Your own family. His expression contorted with panic as he scanned the incriminating evidence surrounding him, the cornered prey with nowhere left to run. It's not what it looks like, I swear, he pleaded, looking around the table desperately. I was going to pay him back. I got in over my head with this real estate deal. Cut the shit, Nathan! Eli roared, slamming his fist on the table and making everyone jump. We all know you've been blowing cash on underground gambling and God knows what else. My heart twisted as hurt flickered across Nathan's face. You told them? I told them the truth, I spat, anger reigniting. The truth about how you've been lying, stealing, and gambling away our future to fund your pathetic addiction. Something dark flickered in Nathan's eyes as his expression hardened. You're one to talk about addiction, Marla. Ever consider you're just a nagging, controlling bitch who can't handle? The crack of my palm across his cheek reverberated through the deathly silent room. A collective gasp rippled from our friends as Nathan cradled his reddened face, pure venom in his glare. Don't you dare talk to my wife like that, you piece of garbage, Eli snarled, rising to his feet menacingly. The tangy metallic scent of blood filled the air. Whether Nathan's lip was split or from my stinging hand, I couldn't tell. All I knew was my body thrumming with adrenaline and fury as the avalanche finally crashed down. Get out, I hissed through gritted teeth, unable to even look at Nathan anymore. Take your shit and get out of my house. For a long, tense moment, Nathan seemed to contemplate digging in, arguing, fighting against the tide. But faced with Eli's imposing figure and our friends' disgusted stares, he had no choice but to slink away in disgrace. One by one, my friends filed out in silence, leaving just Eli and me amid the debris of shattered illusions. As I sank numbly onto the couch, the gravity of what had occurred washed over me in waves. Every duplicitous act, every egregious lie had been laid bare. And yet, rather than the catharsis or relief I expected, all I felt was a bone-deep weariness. Eli squeezed my shoulder gently as I stared off into the distance, unsure what lay ahead. But at least now, the truth was inescapable. The hours and days following that disastrous dinner blurred together in a muddled haze. Nathan made feeble attempts to reconcile, leaving pathetic voicemails and texts that I instantly deleted without listening. I was done being manipulated by his lies. My friends rallied around me, offering steadfast support and shoulders to cry on when the anguish became too much. Angela, in particular, was a rock, spending long nights on my couch as I raged, sobbed, and spilled out the depths of Nathan's deception. I can't believe I was so blind, I whispered hoarsely one evening, clutching a glass of wine like a lifeline. How could I have not seen what a despicable person he really was? Angela squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening with compassion. That's what con artists do, Marla. They become experts at hiding their true nature from even those closest to them. I winced at the harsh truth in her words. Con artist? It left a sour taste just thinking about Nathan that way. As the initial shock wore off, red-hot fury consumed me. The pieces were finally falling into place. His constant business trips and odd hours, the drained bank accounts and mounting debts, his panicked desperation when I uncovered the loan from Eli. It was all to cover up his spiraling gambling addiction and illicit activities. When the anger became too overwhelming to contain, Eli was my release valve. We would meet for drinks or hash it out over the phone, raging about what a pathetic, sniveling coward Nathan had become. He's going to face consequences. Eli growled one night, slamming his fist on the bar with emphasis. I don't care if I have to take his ass to court and garnish every paycheck. He's going to pay back every last cent with interest. My own demands went even further than just financial restitution. I wanted reparations for the emotional and psychological torture Nathan had put me through. Unbidden images would flash through my mind. Nathan sneaking out at odd hours, him huddled over a smoky poker table surrounded by seedy thugs, blowing our hard-earned money in reckless bets. The enormity of his selfish betrayal made me feel physically ill. I began compiling a case to present to my lawyer, documentation of secretive bank transfers and cash withdrawals, incriminating text messages with his gambling buddies, proof that his ludicrous business expenses were actually losses covered up. With each new discovery, my rage toward Nathan calcified like hardening cement. This was so far beyond simple indiscretions or mistakes. This was a systematic, premeditated campaign of fraud and deception against me, his wife, his supposed loved one. I wanted to ensure Nathan's lies finally caught up with him in the most publicly humiliating way possible. My ambushes continued in front of friends, family, anyone who would witness his hollow, groveling attempts to win me back. I'd calmly present the latest piece of damning evidence, watching his face go bloodless with panic. Is this the kind of man you want to be defended? I asked coolly during one such confrontation at Eli's house, holding up bank statements with thousands embezzled. A common criminal who stole from his own family? Nathan opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, sweat beading on his brow as our gathered loved ones stared at him in revulsion. I made mistakes, but I can change, he stammered desperately. We can rebuild the trust, just give me one more chance. His words trailed off as I fixed him with a look of pure, unbridled disgust. You've had more than enough chances, Nathan. Now it's time to face the consequences of your sickening choices. With trembling hands, Eli produced a bound stack of papers, a comprehensive record of every cent Nathan owed, all the debts and losses totaled into a staggering lump sum. This is your path to making amends, Eli stated, his voice dripping with disdain as he shoved the documents into Nathan's chest. Either you square up and start paying, or I take you to court and legally garnish every dime to your name. An oppressive silence hung in the air, punctuated only by Nathan's shuddering breaths. His eyes darted between Eli, me, and the paperwork, the weight of the ultimatum visibly crushing him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he met my gaze with those same wounded puppy dog eyes that had melted me 1,000 times before, but not this time. Please, he croaked out, a broken, pitiful whisper. I crossed my arms, shaking my head slowly as an adamant chill froze over my expression. You had your chance, I said flatly. It's over. And with that, the last withered vines of love and trust I'd clung to for far too long finally unraveled, leaving only the cold, hard truth. Nathan was nothing but a selfish, pathetic liar who deserved to reap the most agonizing consequences for shredding me to pieces. With Eli's steadfast support, I launched a full-scale legal assault against Nathan. No more hollow threats or impassioned rants. It was time to hit him where it hurt most. His wallet. I filed for divorce first, seeking not only a dissolution of our sham marriage, but also compensation for the incredible emotional and financial trauma he'd inflicted. My lawyer was a ruthless barracuda who smelled blood in the water. With the mountain of evidence you've provided, we have a very strong case against your husband for fraud, embezzlement, and gross financial malfeasance, she stated matter-of-factly as we strategized our attack. Before Nathan could so much as blink, the divorce papers were delivered along with the monetary demands, every cent of Eli's original loan, plus additional punitive damages for pain and suffering. Needless to say, Nathan didn't take it well. Are you out of your goddamn mind? He shouted at me during one heated exchange, spittle flying. You're trying to financially cripple me for the rest of my life. I crossed my arms, unmoved by his sputtering outrage. I'm simply pursuing appropriate legal reparations for your egregious betrayals, Nathan. I think I'm more than entitled after you stole from me and destroyed our marriage with your lies. His face mottled red with impotent rage as my words struck a nerve. You self-righteous bitch, like you're so innocent in all this. I'd watch it if I were you, Eli stepped in, shoving his bony finger into Nathan's chest. Keep running that mouth and see how much worse the financial penalties get. Nathan looked ready to swing at his older brother, hands balled into tight fists. But then his shoulders slumped in resignation, maybe finally realizing the futility of his situation. While the divorce proceedings trudged along, Eli and I kept piling on the pressure from every angle. We acquired copies of Nathan's employment file from his real estate broker and gleefully sent the damning documentation to his bosses, records of unexcused absences, documented lies about his whereabouts, even a formal complaint from a client about Nathan's erratic, unprofessional behavior. Within days, the inevitable phone call came. Nathan had been terminated from his job and banned from the premises. One more ruinous consequence for his reckless actions. How's it feel to have your entire life crumbling around you? I asked in a sickly sweet tone after delivering the news in person. Not so fun being on the receiving end of deception, is it? Nathan's face was pallid, his eyes sunken as he stared at me with a potent mix of fear and loathing. You're a sadistic monster, you know that? I shrugged nonchalantly, inspecting my nails. Maybe so, but at least I'm not a pathetic, sniveling liar who torched my own marriage for some cheap gambling thrills. Watching him flinch at my biting words, I felt a twisted sense of wicked satisfaction. For far too long he had gaslit me, controlled the narrative with his manipulations. But now, finally, the all-powerful facade had crumbled away, leaving him weak and powerless. The roles were starkly reversed. Over the ensuing weeks, Nathan couldn't even muster a whimper of protest as heavy garnishments were applied to what little assets and income remained in his name. Insurmountable legal fees mounted as he frantically tried to halt the avalanche, only to be continuously rebuffed. We made sure to extract our proverbial pound of flesh plus interest, calling in every chit and using every underhanded tactic his own duplicity had exposed. Eliciting any mercy would have been useless. We had definitively beaten him into submission, the dying dog too hobbled to bite back. In the end, after liquidating what remained of his rapidly dwindling net worth, we recouped the entirety of Eli's loan amount, plus triple in punitive damages for me. It still wasn't enough to make me feel whole again, but watching Nathan have to grovel and pay his dues was as close to justice as I could realistically hope. As I finally signed the divorce papers, officially severing our toxic union forever, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The worst was over. I had unmasked Nathan's true nature, dragged his sickening con into the harsh light, and ensured he suffered appropriately. While neither of us escaped unscathed, at least I could hold my head high. Nathan was just another disgraced, debt-ridden liar left to rot in the ashes of his own deception. The final decree from the judge sliced through me like a white-hot blade. My marriage was officially over. As I left the stark, sterile confines of the courthouse that day, I couldn't help but feel a strange cocktail of relief and emptiness. Relief that the brutal, dragged-out ordeal with Nathan had finally concluded, but emptiness over the death of the idealistic dreams I had carefully nurtured for so many years. The life I had envisioned, building a home, having children, growing old together, shattered into a million mocking pieces by one man's reprehensible greed and deceit. I gripped the thick sheaf of papers detailing the final divorce judgments, the division of assets heavily in my favor, the monumental punitive damages Nathan was on the hook for, even a strict garnishment of his future earnings to ensure compliance. Tangible evidence of how thoroughly I had dismantled him, the justly earned spoils after our harrowing war. And yet it felt so empty. Hollow, like I was a victor standing amongst the rubble and ruin. You okay? I glanced up to see Eli studying me with a concerned frown, his brow furrowed. In the aftermath of the prolonged legal battles, he had become an invaluable ally, a tenacious partner willing to go to the trenches to hold Nathan accountable. Yeah, I'm fine, I replied automatically, plastering on an unconvincing smile. Just processing everything, you know? Eli nodded solemnly, seeming to recognize my morose mood. We said little as we made our way to the parking lot, the weighty silence between us laden with unspoken words. As I climbed into my car, getting ready to depart our separate ways, Eli rapped his knuckles on the window. When I rolled it down, his expression was somber, yet resolute. You did the right thing, Marla. he stated, leaning down to meet my gaze. I know it doesn't feel like it now, with all the pain and bullshit, but you showed that scumbag the consequences of betraying his family. You held him accountable when no one else could. My throat tightened with emotion as I processed his words, giving a small nod of acknowledgement. Eli squeezed my shoulder bracingly. It'll get easier from here. You've got your whole life ahead to focus on healing and moving forward. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. With that, he stepped back, offering me one final look of solidarity before turning and walking towards his own vehicle. I watched him go, feeling paradoxically lighter yet more adrift than I had in years. The weeks and months that followed were a harsh sojourn into uncharted territory, rebuilding my life from the ashes, one sobering step at a time. I threw myself headlong into my work, determined to re-establish the parts of my identity that Nathan had slowly leached away through years of gaslighting and control. Little by little, with the help of my support system, I regained my footing and composure. The burden of deceit lifted from my shoulders as I finally allowed myself to breathe freely. Inevitably, updates about Nathan's downward spiral trickled back to me. How he was ensnared in another high-stakes gambling scheme, racking up further debts he had no prayer of repaying. How he was kicked out of his rented apartment and sofa surfing from one friend's place to another. Bitter rants about the psycho bitch ex-wife who ruined his life. Part of me felt a vicious sense of vindication upon hearing those sordid tales. Let the sadistic liar reap the fruits of his actions, sleeping in the bed of consequences he had so meticulously made. But for the most part, I simply felt indifferent. A chapter had closed, cauterized after being ruthlessly extricated from my life like a cancerous growth. In the end, the ultimate revenge was simply moving forward, thriving and finding fulfillment in a life cleansed of Nathan's toxic influence. While he spiraled into the ashen abyss of his own making, I steadily rebuilt piece by piece, year over year. A small smile played across my lips as I signed the mortgage papers for my very own home, a peaceful sanctuary uncompromised by any taint of the past. My sanctuary, the home I would raise a family in one day when the time was right. I was free. The long con had finally concluded, and I had emerged battered yet triumphant, wiser to the ways the sadistic deceivers employ to ensnare their prey. Some day down the line, I thought with grim satisfaction, Nathan would understand the most valuable lesson of all, that betrayal and deception bear a toll that no amount of lies can ever repay, no matter how long the con lasts.